I remember speaking to the great Gulzar, the poet, and he once said to me, when I asked him why he still uses a pen, a fountain pen, or a pen of any other type or nature, and he said, what the pen knows and interprets, the keyboard can never know and interpret. Why did this strike have to be the political spine of part one of Railsong?
So that's a really good question because that strike operates at several levels in the book. The fiction writer is always thinking about the tensions inside the place. Because this fictional township, which is, and the period this novel begins is like the late 50s, early 60s, post-independent India. It really carries a sense of Nehruvian idealism in the scientific temper, in self-reliance.
You live in Delhi and you've written about a Bombay that was your life for so many years. What does it cost to write about your old city, our city, from outside of it? All right, my guest of the day has written a fascinating novel. I shall not take names, but I just come out of reading a novel by one of my most favorite authors of all time. Slightly disappointed, but once I read this particular one called Railsong, it warmed the cockles of my heart, and suddenly I started believing in long format. And I call books long format these days in the world of 24 frames per second. Please welcome Rahul Bhattacharya, whose book Railsong left an indelible impression on me. It's on ground as well as online at all major online bookstores, as well as marketplaces, as well as on-ground bookstores. Rahul, wonderful to have you here. And how does it feel to be in a city where you spent so much of your life, my friend?
It's changing all the time, Hrishi. So sometimes I'm not sure whether it's the same city, but I'm really happy to be here with Mr. OG himself. You sound even better in person than you do on radio. Thank you for having me, Hrishi.
You're very kind. Railsong opens with 3-year-old Charu, who's the principal protagonist. I just love her. What a character you've created. Charu telling her father, I want to count people. And indeed, Rahul Bhattacharya, 3 decades later, 400 some pages later, she's still counting. How early did you know that this is that one sentence that would perhaps carry my novel?
Just to give a little context to the reader, she's a young girl, as you said, 3 years old, on a train. They're moving into this railway township in eastern India. And she's asked by her father to count buffaloes, because that's how we used to pass time in the days before we had cell phones, etc. And she said, no, I want to count people. This wasn't the first line of the book in my first draft. But later, as I worked through the draft, and I realized what an important idea this is to the book, when I started exploring the census, the Indian census, as a motif for the book, I realized this small sentence actually almost gives me a working manifesto for the themes of this book. And so, well, that's how it happened.
I find it remarkable that you spent 10 years writing this book, Rahul. And the first draft, all of you who listen or watch us, first draft entirely by hand, on yellow legal pads with 2B pencils, very Toni Morrison method. I remember speaking to the great Gulzar, the poet, and he once said to me, when I asked him why he still uses a pen, a fountain pen, or a pen of any other type or nature, and he said, what the pen knows and interprets, the keyboard can never know and interpret. I'd like you to comment on that and talk to me about that. Talk to me about using 2B pencils and yellow legal pads.
Only Gulzar Saab could put it as beautifully as that. Interestingly, I was forwarded just yesterday, kind of on WhatsApp, this scientific study into what happens when you write with your hands as opposed to what happens when you use the keyboard. And there's apparently a different level of stimulation that occurs because each time you make an alphabet, a letter, it's a different shape. It's triggering your brain, right? In the way, as opposed to a keyboard where all strokes are alike, When you're making an S, it's the same as writing a T or a K. So you're not thinking, you're not activating those neurons to quite the same degree. Just in the act of actually making those shapes on the page. So once those neurons are then triggered, presumably they're taking you into deeper and more interesting places. Uh, so I think there is something to be said for Gulzar Saab's very poetic sort of summary of what happens there. Uh, I just found it impossible after a while when broadband was kind of with us and our phones were permanently connected to just disengage from the world around me and to descend into a space of fiction and to really kind of mine emotion and mine what all the things that go into making a novel. You really have to leave the outside world, the world around you. You have to kind of leave it behind. So when I read that the great Toni Morrison would write with yellow legal pads using 2B pencils before the morning light came in, I thought, well, I'm going to do exactly that. She was a single mother, so she had a job. I had just become a father. I had a job. So that time of the morning seemed the appropriate time to work. And well, that sort of simple, just using that method of imitation allowed me to then kind of progress with this book.
One of the reasons I'd urge you to go and buy Rahul Bhattacharya's Railsong is also this vivid description of a railway township. I've never lived in a railway township, but so many friends who have lived in steel townships and railway townships come and talk about their vibrant existence and their childhood. And I feel a sense of nostalgia at a childhood I missed out on. And indeed, Bombalpur, Rahul, doesn't exist on any map. But the railway colony, the C-type quarters, the light machine shop, the chargeman grades, it's all rendered with such bureaucratic precision. I love it. How do you build a place that's invented but never really feels invented?
So interestingly, Rishi, I never lived in a railway township or any kind of township at all. But because my father worked in a cement company, we would sometimes, while traveling to factory towns and things like that, I would get a sense of what township life is, and I found them very interesting. What is this kind of bubble of order amid the larger Indian chaos? What is? It seems this sort of the organizedness of a township, its completeness within. It's very different from life with the world around it. At the same time, what are the tensions? And well, the fiction writer is always thinking about the tensions inside the place. So when you have something which seems so kind of clinical and ordered and functional, what are the anxieties and stresses within it? And because this fictional township, which is, and the period this novel begins is like the late 50s, early 60s, post-independent India, it really carries a sense of Nehruvian idealism in the scientific temper, in self-reliance. And a place like this, where a workshop is the kind of the center of your settlement, which is very unusual for an Indian place where people don't live along the kind of conventional lines of caste or religion or linguistic community. What are the anxieties in a place like that? What is the cultural alienation that people feel? Those were the things. What is in the disconnection between a place like this and the world around it? What is it that I can explore? And I found that I was able to, having created a place like this through travel, through reading kind of books, obscure like sociological tracts on townships of that period, I wanted to then burrow into the tensions inside.
There is, don't get me wrong, just because we're talking about railway townships and Charu and things like that, there is so much underlying wit. There is a running gag in Railsong about a fish, and that running gag indeed becomes one of the book's most serious inquiries. And this is to all of you who are listening in or watching us. And here's my question to you. I mean, Chitol's father invents his surname. He abandons Chattopadhyay for an oily fish. And decades later, his children are still defending the choice. Talk to me about naming as politics in this novel. And indeed about that running gag about a fish becoming one of the novel's most serious inquiries.
So, I mean, this, in a sense, connects us to the very first question you asked me about counting people. What does it mean to be a person in India? What are the markers you're carrying inside of you? This is a country of almost unimaginable types, right? So, all of us are kind of in the matrix. We belong to a religion, a caste, a linguistic community with our levels of education, and so on, etc. And but something transcends that. There's also a sense of individualism, and as we are people, and so this is also a country of more individuals than any other country in the world. But there's sometimes a conflict between these two things, between what you are and who you are, right? And nothing suggests this more strongly than the surname. In Charu's case, her parents were basically, she's the product of an intercaste marriage. Remember, this is at the time they got married. Interestingly, intercaste unions were not legally permitted. Forget not having social sanctions, but those laws began to be framed only in the 1940s and 50s, where otherwise families could legally disinherit heirs who have married outside their caste. So all of these battles were actually quite fresh. In order to kind of make this intercaste union to throw a kind of both a sense of morality as well as a sense of play behind it, he decides to use, at the suggestion of his wife. I'll let you discover how it happens if you kind of read the novel. The name of his, the pen name that he uses when he's like an amateur Bangla writer, which is Chitol, a fabled fish, as you who has grown up in Kolkata might know. Of course, I know there'll be Bengalis who think Ilish is the greatest fish, but I'm in Camp
And the
Chitol.
debate rages on.
Yeah, it is an oily, slightly absurd-looking fish, which is kind of snouty mouth and a humped back. So that gives it a kind of sense of levity, and it also kind of defines her father's and her parents' outlook towards the question that we were just speaking about, of a kind of Nehruvian sense of egalitarianism, of looking forward. I mean, mind you, and as Charu finds through the course of this novel, it's not a thing easily done. I mean, with caste, it's just by jettisoning your name, you can't really jettison its privileges.
True.
No less than you can jettison its kind of deprivations. So it remains a symbolic gesture. I mean, it's important to kind of realize, for people who say, I don't believe in caste, or, that is a bit of an empty statement. You may not believe in it, but caste believes in all of us.
Yeah. I have to say that Charu is, to me, the most fully imagined female character that I've read in recent Indian fiction, and I must compliment you. And it's not just me who's saying that. Many reviewers have said that. I mean, when I went to do a back ref, a ground check, when I was researching for this interview, I found so many vibrant things that people have said. As a male writer, what's the line between inhabiting a woman's interiority and presuming on it?
So there is this risk with all fiction.
Yeah.
When you're forget a female character or a character from another country. If I was to fictionalize somebody very close to me in all demographic senses, there is still a kind of imagination and a consciousness at work. The character is always separate. You're right in the dangers of doing something like writing outside your gender, is that you simply may not realize that you don't know enough. And all your conditioning, you're sometimes not aware of your conditioning. So the first thing like when it became clear that my protagonist for this novel is a woman, which was not which was something that emerged on the page as I began drafting, and then I kind of followed it through and through, is I realized that I have to kind of think about all the things that I may not know, but I think I know. So that means reading more deeply, thinking, reading across genres, reading across languages, to really kind of give myself the confidence of female articulation. And so everything that you do needs to be kind of tested. And then you eventually also rely on your editors to kind of give you the feedback on, so this seems off or this doesn't seem off.
What really spoke to me was the 1974 railway strike. I mean, you, Rahul, were not even born when that happened. This is George Fernandez's time, hundreds of women on the tracks, thousands jailed. And it's so, how do I say it? It left an impact that your protagonist's father writes, I will not indulge in anti-national activity 100 times. I mean, it's a chapter of Indian history that we've all half forgotten. Why did the strike have to be the political spine of part one of Railsong?
So that's a really good question, because that strike operates at several levels in the book. A is we are in a railway township, and something like that is going to be a defining event in the lives of the people who live there. This was, for younger listeners, perhaps the largest industrial action ever undertaken by anyone, anywhere. At some point or the other, the great part of 1.7, 1.8 million railway workers went on strike. I mean, think about what that means. Think about the crazy scenes we read about when Indigo collapsed for a few days, and multiply that by like 1,000. That time there were no private aircrafts. Even now, the number of people who travel Indian Railways in, say, about a week or 10 days is equal to the number of air passengers across a whole year. So when the railway network gets paralyzed, just think about what happens to this country. And it was George Fernandez who kind of tried to mobilize the railway workers, who were kind of fighting for a variety of things to improve their lot, saying that 15 days railway strike and this country will starve. I mean, that's how much was riding on it. So there is this kind of the political and the social and the economic carrier of the world and of the novel is kind of portrayed through the strike. But for Charu, who's a rebellious young woman, a motherless girl in that township, it is also a moment of rupture for her. It's a moment of rupture for Indian democracy, because the railway strike is basically a precursor to the emergency. And that's the event that people think about now and talk about and write books about. But the railway strike and Indira Gandhi's kind of brutal crushing of it, that really was something that told us that something like emergency is coming. So a moment of rupture for Indian democracy, a moment of rupture for Charu in her life. It perpetrates from her an action which then kind of changes the course of things. She flees across the country, a young runaway girl, comes to the city of Bombay. So a lot of things happen via that railway strike.
Well, for all Mumbaikars who are listening to us on the radio, they'd love the fact that you've lived here for many, many a year. Love the fact that you're from Campion. But for those of you watching us on video across the country, around the world, Cathedral and John Connon and Campion and Bombay Scottish are these legacy schools in Mumbai. And indeed, Rahul Bhattacharya went to one of them. He's a Campion boy.
God.
And it's wonderful. It's wonderful
Right.
that Charu arrives in Bombay, the principal protagonist of your novel, of Railsong. And the city sings. I mean, Kotimbir Vadi, Brun Maska, the coconut fronds at VT, the punctuality gap between Western and Central. To me, it's wonderful that you live in Delhi and you've written about a Bombay that was your life for so many years. What does it cost to write about your old city, our city, from outside of it?
So interestingly, I myself am a migrant to Bombay, because I was born in Bombay, because my mother was a Bombay born and bred. but my father wasn't. And I was born in Bombay, then much of my childhood was in Secunderabad. Then we came here when I was 9, and then much of my young life was in this city. But I'm writing about a city that I don't actually know, because the novel ends close to the period that I came. I came like about maybe 89, novel ends in 92. So a lot of it was kind of scratching back. And I just wonder whether something about my experience of coming here at that age led me to kind of scratch a little deeper into the period that I was coming into. Uh, what was the question, Rishi? What does it cost to write about the?
Yeah, about your
Yeah.
old city from outside of it. Yeah.
It didn't actually cost me too much emotionally. It was actually exhilarating to write about Bombay of that period.
Lovely.
It is, because that moment when she comes to Bombay, we see it from the inside. We see it from the inside of this unreserved working compartment. And she emerges from the train onto the concourse, under the gargoyles at the Victoria terminus. Typically, we see that when in cinema, when the scene cuts to Bombay, we see the same shot, but we see it from the outside. You see an exterior of the VT to show that things have now moved to Bombay. So I was kind of doing it from the inside, just to understand the kind of to use that worn cliche of the spirit of Bombay, as it was called then. That was quite exciting, because I think no matter how much the city changes, there is something about it. There is something about the language on the street. There is something about the sea and what it kind of, the freedom it might promise. There is something about the dreams peddled in Bollywood and the and advertising industries that kind of still calls people here and gives them a sense that you can start over, make something of yourself.
There is a promise in the air.
Yes. And no matter how many hours you've been on that unreserved train and you're ready to pass out, as Charu does, there is that promise. The Bombay of the 1970s was especially fun and interesting to research, because for a working woman, it was a city that gave much more than any other place in India. I mean, Delhi was still like a sort of sarkari, sleepy town. In a sense, Kolkata was on the decline. I think Bangalore wasn't Bangalore. Madras was perhaps considered too provincial. But Bombay was Bombay. Bombay was where you could go, and women could join the workforce. They felt free walking about. There is all kinds of resistance movements coming up, anti-price rise movements. One of them is kind of depicted in the novel, just as she comes out of the Victoria terminus. Working class women banging these balans on thalis to kind of demand the end of price rise. Anyway, so there was a lot going on. I spoke to my mother about what it felt like, to the city of of that time, and I feel there was a lot of energy. And it was fun. It was fun to recreate that.
The men in Charu's romantic life appear only as initials. I mean, there's J, there's N, there's P. Charu, of course, for those of you who've joined us late, is the principal protagonist of Rahul Bhattacharya's novel Railsong. Why, pray, deny readers something as basic as a name?
Why not just chuck the men into the background, make them like these dancing extras? If they've done enough in the novel to deserve a full name, then we'll grant it to them. So that was one reason. Actually, that was one reason, because I'm kind of centering Charu so deliberately in the novel, and so much about the novel is female relationships and solidarities or frictions, as they may be, that I felt it would be interesting to kind of not show the romantic interest as the thing in Charu's life. Because also they're not. I mean, this is a woman with a very active relationship with the world around her, and it is not the story of a woman who's just kind of seeking a soulmate and looking for fulfillment in an ideal partner, or whatever it is. That was one aspect of it. And the other thing was, now coming back to our things about taxonomy and types of people and counting people, what would the reader assume of these people if I was to keep them as initials? Would you think, what would you what assumptions would you make about their religion, about
You're
their
actually,
caste,
you're
about
actually
their...
daring the reader to kind of guess their religion or caste.
That's right. I'm
That's what you're
testing
doing.
them. I'm trying to see that, and if and when a name is revealed, then do you think that you would have kind of, because of your own conditioning, made
Yeah.
assumptions? That's fun.
So the novel ends December 5, 1992. Charu's watching Ambedkarites in blue and white at the platform, singing for Baba Sahib's death anniversary, while coaches of car sevaks are chanting their way to Ayodhya. Rahul, did you always know it would end on that day, or did the date find you?
I felt, Rishi, that 1992 was such a pivotal moment in modern Indian history. I mean, we had economic liberalization coming just before that. And as we briefly discussed when we were talking about the tyranny of OTPs and what it takes to enter a corporate building nowadays, what these times are like. I mean, post-lib India is so different from the India I knew of the 80s, and you knew as well. That's one aspect of it. And the other thing is, I felt the demolition of the Babri Masjid, it kind of it changed the compact Indian people had with the idea of their country, and what is it that we set out to become in 1947, and the constitutional idea of the people and the kind of idealistic imagination of the people. That was a symbol of something of a big rupture. The way it gave rise to the to perhaps suppressed feelings and sometimes encouraged fresh feeling, uh, to to renegotiate our relationship with ourselves. I found that a book that continues in the same way the Railsong goes up to 92, with kind of almost a, and at some level almost a forensic interest in how society has evolved after 1992 would look very different. It would be its own project.
As somebody who's worked in radio and audio for over 3 decades, I love, and this is for all of you who haven't picked up the Rahul Bhattacharya's writing as yet, in Railsong, how there's a deep musicality to his prose. I mean, there's Lata and Mukesh on the 2-in-1. There's the Yesudas singer at VT, Victoria Terminus. There's Salil Chaudhary and Bhupen Hazarika in the acknowledgements. A Marathi anti-caste poem at a very pivotal moment. I want to ask you, what music were you listening to as you wrote this?
Interestingly, I didn't listen to as much music as I did for my previous two books. I used to listen to music all the time while working. It gave me a kind of, well, you know this better than anyone. You know what the music does to one's spirit. The danger is that anything that you write to great music seems great on the page because the sound in your ear is so good and you're feeling so good inside. But I would work late at night as well, and music would keep me company. Here I was working early in the morning monastically with these pencils and sharpeners, and much quieter. But there were times, especially when I started revising, when I would have music in my ears, and it was usually things from that period. A lot of 70s music. I mean, you mentioned some of those names. Those songs I still love listening to, what they call old Hindi film songs. Some classical music. That can be a little distracting if you get very deep into it. I loved listening to Ustad Vilayat Khan and Bismillah Khan and music of that kind. But I always try to see where the music can kind of put me in if I'm trying to capture an emotion on the page, I try to find the music that would put me in that state of mind. Very often it is from the period, so like Sholilda, who's actually, I only noticed when later on I was making a playlist for a US website about what inspired Railsong, and I saw that he's there in so many languages because of and that just happened. You know, I have his Bangla songs, I have some of his Hindi film songs, etc. But sometimes I also listen to music that, for example, Ali Farka Toure and Rai Kuda's Talking Timbuktu. There's one song in there which kind of just touches something inside me, which releases emotions in a way, to put it in slightly corny terms, which other music might not. So then I would just like listen to that 4 or 5 times and keep it going.
Well, for those of you who don't know his career track record, Rahul Bhattacharya went from being one of the country's finest cricket writers to a novelist. And indeed, he spent one full decade on this particular book, Railsong. There's a book called Pundits from Pakistan. And I did tell you off the mic that Clayton Marzello, one of India's foremost sports journalists, is a dear friend. And him and me used to work for the same parent company, the same alma mater, and work in the same building. And I used to be holed up in studios all day. And I used to be envious of Clayton going to Lord's and the MCG and, reporting from these amazing places. Cricket writing, a tour writer's discipline, what is that? What did it give you? And what did it teach you? And did you have to unlearn anything really?
Yeah, it's so nice to speak about Clayton, a real institution. Cricket writing, well, it does teach you discipline. People don't realize it seems like a very cushy job, and it is. It comes with fantastic privilege. Because I became a cricket writer straight after kind of barely graduating in pure mathematics at the age of 20. In my early 20s, I got the chance to travel to the West Indies, to South Africa, to England, to Pakistan on work, and those are incredible opportunities. Our work actually only begins when play finishes, So
filing in stories, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So cricketers, they're working very hard on the field, and we're watching them. And then when they go back to the hotel, we're busy working. I'll say a few things about writing on sport. It teaches you to pacing. It teaches you to capture mood. Because of the travel, you get an instinctive sense of how sport relates to the wider society, and therefore, through the act of covering a tour, you're actually engaging with the country you're in quite deeply. So all of those things I learned. I learned that no matter how tired you are, whatever, you have to file a story, that you have to try and make your words live on the page. You may not have time to do that. So cricket gave me my first book, which is a tour book of Pakistan, of the Indian cricket team and me traveling with them in 2004. It also gave me then the kind of venue, to use the cricket term, for my second book, which was set in the Caribbean, in Guyana. That's a country I visited while I was a very young cricket reporter, and I found it so deeply fascinating that I just told myself I have to come back here and spend some time. And that became my first novel, The Sly Company of People Who Care. And then while writing Railsong, I was editing cricket. I was no longer on the circuit. So cricket has also enabled this novel, Railsong, in a sense. So I have much to be grateful to cricket for.
Lovely. I haven't read the last novel, which
Sly Company. That's actually a much more musical book than Railsong, because so much of the Caribbean personalities and their dreams and their brutal histories is expressed through music. I learned a lot about the West Indies and by listening to their music.
And the Indian diaspora, amazing, 40%. Guyana,
And chutney music. I mean, that is, if you, that is, so there's calypso, chutney, reggae, dancehall. If you spend enough time with all of that, you actually get a really deep and vivid sense of that society. I had the music in my ears all the time after I returned. Partly that was also because there was a building next to mine in Delhi was kind of being broken down. And so I had to keep that noise out. And then the music kind of connected me deeply to the subject I was writing.
Lovely. My last question is about Charu. One of the most vivid images for me from the novel that I think of, this is Railsong, is her boarding the train with a backpack pressed into her shoulders, carrying a great many written people. If on this show we could put one question to Miss Chitol herself, not to Rahul Bhattacharya, what would Charu most want us to ask her?
It's a really tricky one. You asked me, I think you said at the start of the show, so many pages later, she's still counting. So maybe you could ask her, Charu, is still counting? हो गया क्या?
Lovely.
Yeah.
Please go get Rahul Bhattacharya's Railsong. Also, read the back catalog. It's a wonderful way to discover his writing. I'm going to do that post this interview. Hey, thank you very much.
Such a pleasure. An
I hope
honor.
you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
this. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did bringing it to you.
Loved it. Thank you so much, Hrishi.
Wonderful. And as always, keep it tuned to all our podcasts, all our radio specials. And from me, Hrishi K, it's bye-bye.